Welcome back to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and with me is my guest and, of course, my co-host, Barton Nunley. And we got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right back into it and let's continue. Thank you.
And I have another question for you too, Darrell. When you guys were camping at this site, you said your friend Charlie that he had stayed out there for a week by himself.
No, he didn't stay a week. I think he stayed 3 or 4 nights. But Charlie Raymond, he's a Kentucky BFRO. He's a real good guy. I mean, I liked him at that time. I've heard some things since then that makes me wonder, but, you know...
right, so do you ever wonder why a big-name researcher like that would go out looking for Bigfoot, and then once they arrive at his location, he never went out of the tent, never went outside of the tent? That's kind of...
I was going to ask, like, if he... Because that was kind of weird. Like, when you said this guy, Charlie, like, he was out there... I don't know him. I don't know who this guy is. I've never heard of him, but... Like when you said,
I know him very well.
So, my point though is like if your friend Charlie, he was out there, and he just like he didn't tell you that this was going on, or he did tell you, and you say he went out there without weapons too. Like what?
Here's what happened. You know, me and Billy invited him down. Charlie came to my house, my farm, and him and a friend, and they stayed there and. We talked, and I told him what was going on and everything, that we had these creatures, because he was actually his biggest thing was he wanted to interact with them and see the creatures, and just like any researcher does. And I had known Charlie from some other friends and met him before. I didn't know him like my best friend, but I liked him. He was a good guy, and I believed in what he told me, but I called him down, and we went down there, and he followed us down there, him and his friend, and they set camp up pretty close to the gifting spot we had, and they actually stayed down there all night. Myself and Billy didn't stay; they did, him and his friend. And he had told me that in the middle of the night, several times, they heard something walking through the camp and knocking over. I thought he said a pot or a pan, and they did know that they were out there walking around. And I asked Charlie if he had a weapon, and he said, no, I don't carry a weapon most of the time when I do get out and research. So I don't know. I'm not sure that he did, how many he did see or what he did see, but his reaction was, yeah, they're here. So, and he and I and Billy walked some of the areas real deep back in those woods a couple days that they were there. And we've seen a lot of, there was no doubt they were there. I mean, Billy and I already knew they were there. I'd already seen one myself. I'd seen 2 by that time myself, and Billy had seen 4 or 5 of them, and he's seen the big male that he said was about 12 foot tall. I never seen it, or I never seen the other male that Billy said was about 10 foot tall. And he went by that height, by the distance from the bottom of the deck to where the lady where he had seen the head above the deck. He measured from the top of the deck to there, and it was 12 foot. So I never seen the big ones. I did see the juvenile 2 different times, and I did see the female 3 or 4 times. She would come out of the woods and sit next to the tree while the juvenile would play around the tree. So those things were there, but the weird thing that gets me, and still today stays in my mind, is, you know, we didn't have any problem until we started seeing these orbs, these strange orbs flying through the trees around us, and it really weirded me out. I couldn't believe my cell phone wouldn't work, my alarms are going off. And my watch, well, when I got in the truck, I realized my watch was not even working. So something drained the energy out of what we had. I don't know how it did it or how or what, but some kind of force drained the energy out of our equipment we had. if I remember right, I think Billy's FLIR didn't work either. But I know everything we had electrical didn't work, and it made no sense at all. And then within a week or so, these things, or whatever it was, there's no doubt it was Bigfoot because I had tracks and everything else. But these things came to my house and started attacking me when I didn't even do anything to them. So,
right, Darrell. So, do you think that these seemingly unrelated phenomena could somehow possibly be related in reality?
You know, Barton, I really do that all of it's related. I've never seen a UFO before. I personally haven't. Plenty of friends have.
Sure you did. You saw a bunch of them. Those orbs they call them UAPs now, Darrell.
Yeah.
So they're unidentified aerial phenomena.
I'm talking about
it's the same thing.
But I've never. But my point is, I think they're all connected, all of them.
Yeah, you're right. That's a logical conclusion that any critically thinking man would come to when you have all these strange phenomena happening at the same place at the same time. Well, it shouldn't be unless there was a connection between all of them. And you're seeing these UAPs, you can call them orbs, or you can call them UFOs, or you can call them UAPs, but you actually saw one small one turn into a possum, correct?
I couldn't believe that. It was unbelievable. If I had somebody with me that seen that, I would honestly think that I just imagined it. But I watched this thing from across the ground. I'm talking about it was like a light bulb. It was that bright. And you can picture how dark the woods is at night when you're in deep like we were. And this thing was so bright. It was just like, that was what weirded me out when I started to shoot the thing, because it came right to the tree I was at. And when he hit that light, it just turned into a possum. It was the craziest thing I ever seen. And Billy said, I can't believe what I just seen. I said, I can't either. And that's when we seen the two big red orbs, red, orange, pink colored orbs. And the next week, I was weirded out that night. But the next week when we went back and seen all those little orbs, and then all that, the tree knocks, and then the orbs come in, and then the alarms going off. I was done with researching for a while. I was taking a break, and trying to help David out. And we did help David out quite a bit. He ended up putting, I think, a 8 or 10 foot chain link fence up around his house, and he's got dogs in there. And he's also got floodlights all around his house and property, and motion cameras too. So now when they do come out, those lights come on, they go back in. They don't bother his house. So it costs him quite a bit of expense to take care of the problem. But those things are still down there. Matter of fact, the story that he has told me, and he still lives there, that they were building a house back behind him, not where we were at, but back further behind where we were at. Somebody had bought some land, and last spring these framers came in the morning to finish framing the house, and these creatures were tearing down the house. They tore all the framing down. They actually witnessed them doing it.
So
wow.
There were these Bigfoot type. Wait a minute, these Bigfoot type creatures. They came and they tore up a house that was being built.
They were building a house back in there behind where we were at when we seen it, back further behind there, a good ways back there. But these people had bought some property back in there. Now this borders, I meant to tell you this a minute ago, it borders an area. I don't tell everybody this because I don't want people going down to David's house and bothering him.
Of course.
Some type of researcher, but this borders an area called Cheatham Game Reserve. And for some reason, Cheatham Game Reserve closed down 300 acres and won't let anybody hunt in there anymore, right next to where we were at. And you can't even hunt there. You can't go in there for any reason. And back in behind there anyway, these people had bought some property on the edge of the game reserve on private property, and they were building a house. this is a story that David had told me, and he's told me this. He's told me several stories in the last year. He'll call me and tell me what's going on down there. And these people were building a house, and they already had the subfloor up, and they had framed the walls. You know how you frame a house. They had it all framed, and the framers had went in a couple of days after all this was done, and they were going to finish framing. And when they pulled in the driveway to where they were finished framing, these Bigfoot were there and were tearing the house down, the framing. It's not actually a house when it's a frame. It's just a frame part where you put the materials on it to build the house. But they were tearing it down when they pulled in, and the framers left and wouldn't go back. So I don't know.
Wow, didn't you think to take a picture of that?
I really don't know. What I understood was the news was called out there, local news station. I didn't see any of this. David might be able to answer that question for you. He's also in my group. But another thing too, there's I'm trying to think of the name of it. Not too far from there, I know several officers that work Cheatham County. They used to work for me when I was mayor, and they're at Cheatham County now. And I had talked to them recently, not recently, in the last year or two, and they said there had been a lot of sightings, people calling in down there in that area of these Bigfoot, people seeing them down there. So they know about them. We all know that. But it's kind of strange why they closed 300 acres of a game reserve, and now they let anybody go in there. So apparently some hunters seen them, or they were scared by them, or something happened. I don't know what it was, but I got a good idea what it was. But that's a pretty remote area down there. It's not far from Nashville, but it's remote. And these creatures, to me, I've learned a lot by research, and they always seem to be close to water, and they always seem to be the ones that I've encountered don't seem to be scared of anywhere to be. They'd be close to the city, they'd be in the woods, way out. I think there's a lot more of them than people know are out there. And
absolutely. Sure. I believe that too.
I've got a lady that called me in Hartsville, Tennessee, if you know where that's at. A lot of people knew I was researching, and if somebody had an encounter, they would give them my number, or they would text me or call me or something. And I had a lady in Hartsville that lived in Hartsville, Tennessee, who actually lives in downtown Hartsville, which is not a very big town, but she lived in it was like a four condominiums together that she was renting. And I actually went up there. This was back 2016, I guess it was, maybe 17. But she would go out on her back deck at night, or her condo, and to the left of her was a restaurant. I don't know what kind of restaurant it was, but she said it was a restaurant. They served food. And they had two big dumpsters behind it, and they were back behind it, but it had a street light back there. And she had witnessed these creatures coming out of the woods at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning while she was on her back deck smoking. She would go out to smoke. And these things were coming and opening the dumpster lid up and reaching in and getting bags and walking out in the woods with them. I guess they were just getting a free meal. But she had witnessed it several times. And I went up there several times. I've never seen any of them. I did stay out there, but I never seen one. But she had tried to take pictures of them, but didn't have a picture. But that's how close they come in. They're not scared of us. Not scared of us at all.
Right, they're not. That's because we cannot harm these creatures in any way, Darrell. If gunfire could kill Bigfoot creatures, there would be no mystery left, because we'd have solved that mystery back in 1975 in Spotsville. So we had a bunch of people up on my house, and they all firing on this creature that was out just beyond the tree line. It was probably maybe 50 feet away from the roof that they was on. And they went the next day, and there was nothing there but a dead dog that had been all the guts removed and the eyeballs and tongue removed. So I don't believe we can harm these creatures in any way. And I'm sitting here wondering, I wonder if anybody that's listening to this podcast is wondering the same thing. If an orb the size of a light bulb changes into a small animal like a possum, well, what do the bigger orbs the size of beach balls change into?
Dogman, Bigfoot, all kinds of weird stuff.
Right. I think you're both right. What do they change into? But, I still believe, and, the worst thing about that is that it brought the fear back into me again. And that was the worst thing I got out of it. So I have that fear again that I got rid of. It's not as bad, but it's there. And these things, I truly believe that some people are more prone for some reason to attract these creatures, because I've seen more of them than people I know. I mean, I've got friends that's hunted in the woods 30, 40 or longer years. They've never seen one. They've never had an encounter. They don't see anything. But then me, I have encounters over and over, and just by going fishing, I wasn't looking for Bigfoot. It found me. So I don't really understand how some people seem to attract that type thing, and I wish I wasn't one that did that, but I believe I am.
Well, Darrell, I can say this. I know that I think once you've seen one, you're more likely to have experiences. You're more likely to have something, because I think there's some sort of an attachment that comes with this thing, and I really think that, because I haven't personally, with my encounter I had was a Dogman encounter when I was 15. Now, I haven't seen, like, full-on seen another one that looked like that, but I have felt the presence of it a couple different times when I was working, and I could close my eyes, and in my mind's eye, I could see it, and I knew that it was around, and I've even had it happen at my studio. When I was on the live stream and I recorded with Steve Stockton, everybody heard this loud howl that was on the show. A lot of my listeners, pointed it out to me. I think it was Chris Clough, one of me and Barton's mutual friends, that sent me a copy, a link to he said, to the show, and said, hey, this, and it was at the 1 minute something, 1 hour, 1 minute mark, something like that. And, you could hear a howl, and Steve heard it. And I didn't hear it.
My wife and I heard it too.
Yeah, I didn't hear it. And so, but it was weird, because earlier that night I was having this weird thought that this thing was around the studio. And I was just like, it was weird. Now, earlier when you were talking about the orbs, like, I'm sitting here and Anthony's asleep in the office. Like, he helped me set up or whatever. And he's really tired. And we had a bunch of stuff to do today. So we have a really comfortable spot in there, a couch or whatever. So he's crashed out in there. My wife is at the house along with my brother, and they're at work. A couple of the guys that would normally be around, they're at work. So like Tony and Scorpion, whatever. So I'm over here in the studio pretty much by myself. And like when you were talking about the orbs, I thought I saw somebody walk by going to the bathroom. And I thought, oh, Anthony must be up. And I look up and there's nobody there. And it was when you were talking about that, and I'm not kidding. I'm sitting here, and it just gave me the willies. I was like, whoa. And that's happened before in the studio when we've talked about certain subjects. But when you start talking about orbs and you start talking about these creatures, things happen. You know what I mean? It's just like, and people don't want to believe that. They want to believe that these things, and they try to compartmentalize all this stuff. And, and you go on certain people's shows, they want to know about the Dogman, but they don't care to hear about all the stuff that's going on around it. So in the book that I'm writing right now, hopefully it'll be out by Christmas. That's my goal, is to get it done and get it published by Christmas. But the thing is, there are accounts, and me and Barton have talked about this at length, and we talked about it with Ken Gerhard, because Barton and Ken have helped me interview some people. One of the things that I've noticed is, like, a lot of these people will have more than just like a Bigfoot or a Dogman encounter. They'll have something going on in their house, like poltergeist activity, or they'll have like UFO activity. They'll have weird, like orbs and all kinds of strange things. Like San Gabriel River, I had a guy who was on my show not too long ago. And like the day before he was on my show, somebody had reported a green beach ball size, like you said, Barton, like a beach ball. Like it was the size of one. It was bouncing around on the San Gabriel River. The next day, Roy Garza, friend of mine, contacts me, sees a 10-foot tall Bigfoot on the banks of the river with his brother. I mean, you know, when you start taking these, when you get as many stories as I have and you put them all together, you start to see patterns, you know, and when you see these threads, you know, like there's orbs, there's balls of light, you know, and then touching on what you said about how you don't think they can be hurt. Well, I got a story that was told by somebody's grandfather. This was around Bandera. It's outside of San Antonio. It's in between Austin and San Antonio, like to the west. And there was a Bigfoot type creature that was harassing this family. This happened in like 1910 or something. It was really a long time ago. And the family now, of course, a lot of Texas was very rural and still is. There's a lot of ruralness in Texas. And a lot of people didn't even have electricity till the late 50s here in Texas. So, you know, this was back in the days of kerosene lamps and whatever. 1910 might as well have been 1880. And this Bigfoot thing was coming right up, and they had this dog run cabin, and this thing had come up in between the dog run, and one of the people that was being assailed by this thing was a female, but she got brave and she doused it with kerosene and lit it on fire. Okay, closed the door, and it was like, hey, you know what? We're gonna die. You know, like we're done playing around. We're gonna burn this thing. This thing just took off walking slowly in between the dog run, down the steps, and just walked off into the woods. It didn't roll around on the ground and scream in agony and flail around. None of that. There was none of this, you know, it wasn't nothing dramatic. And this guy told me his grandfather told him this story because it was told to him by his father or whatever. And he said that, dude, it was just flailing around. Like trying to get into the cabins, like trying to beat, you know, but once they lit it on fire, it just walked off. It didn't flail around. It didn't do anything. A normal, natural creature would start to freak out and scream and try to run away and try to go find water and try to get in and submerge itself or roll around the ground or something, put dirt on itself. It didn't do any of those things. It didn't do anything that a natural animal would do. It just walked off into the woods, and then some of the woods caught fire. And then, you know, but it didn't turn into a forest fire, but it was, you know, it was crazy.
Just my personal belief, I could be wrong, but my personal belief is that some of these are the Nephilim type, and I don't know if all of them are or not. It probably are, but, you know, my grandfather also told me a story about when he was a little boy, in the same area that I had my first sighting. You know, when he was a little boy, he lived in that house down there, right where I was hunting, right across from it. Well, it was a good 60 yards from it to the left across the creek. It was just the only thing I could see was some old logs sticking out and part of pieces of tin laying there. So it had been falling in for quite a while. He was born in 1900, so it'd been a long time. But he was talking about how he was a little boy that the first time he had heard of one, and I think he was 6 or 7 years old when this happened. His uncle lived with him there in the house with his dad and mother and his brother. And his uncle had went out squirrel hunting, and one of those things had got after him and chased him home. And my grandfather said that he was scared to death in the house. They had an old, you know, log house, and they had the door barred with everything they could. And this thing was beating on the doors, trying to get the door open to get in to get his uncle. And he said that went on all night long until daylight, and then it left and it didn't come back. But he said he was scared to death when he was a little boy, with that happening. He didn't see that creature, but he could hear it banging on the log house, and it was definitely trying to get his uncle. So I truly believe that some of them are evil. I don't know if all of them are, or maybe a different type. I mean, I've read up on so many different people and different stories. Dr. Matthew Johnson, I used to think he was completely crazy, but I don't anymore. A lot of his ideas I can believe in, and some of them I'm not sure about. But he says there's only one Bigfoot, and it's called the Xanu. Xanue, and the other ones are a favorite and are similar, but they're not the Bigfoot. They were left here by visitors from another planet, and they're called the Tracons, and they are all evil, and they are enemies of the only Bigfoot, the Xanu. That's why when you see X's in the woods, the trees that are formed X's, that's the mark of the Xanu that live in the woods. And I'm not sure that's not true, because I truly don't believe that the ones I've seen at the river were that type of Bigfoot that were trying to harm me. But I do believe the other ones were. I believe they were the other type.
Well, in they may be different kinds. I mean, but if you think about it, though, and if we go down the rabbit hole for just a minute here, guys, like if you look at the Nephilim, okay, they're basically what they are basically like they're. I mean, when you break it down, they're human mixed with demon. That's what they are. I mean, and that's literally, and even if like if you believe in like the fairies or the jinn, both species of demon, which is what they are, they are different cultural names, and they live in different regions, but they have offspring, like they have families, and according to the Quran, when it talks about the jinn, they're not all evil. Like some of them are evil, and then they even have religions. Like some of them are actually Christian, some of them are Jewish, some of them are Muslim. It's weird. Like they have their own hierarchies, but they have their own religions and their own families. And the fairies are kind of like that too. There's the Seelie court and the unseelie court, and so it's like the clean and then the unclean. And so it's really weird. Like because the word it's Gaelic, but it's the same thing. I mean, you have the Bigfoot is just to me a type or species of Nephilim. They could be from many different places. Ancient Lemuria, Agartha, Shangri-La, all these different cities that come from, the openings of the inner earth. I mean, the book of Job, and I've said this before on my show, it's like when God asks Satan, where hast thou been? He says, I've been walking to and fro upon and within the earth. And, the book of Job actually predates Genesis, which a lot of people don't know that. Our Bible, the Christian Bible, the King James Version, it starts with Genesis, but Genesis is the book of Job is actually way, way older. And it's actually an Arabic story, and people they don't understand that. It's hard to, to express, like when you're dealing with people who have been like, I don't know, I don't want to say brainwashed, but like they've been subjected to a certain type of learning since they were children, whether they're Muslim or Christian or Jewish or Buddhist, Hindu, whatever. It's very hard to convince them of anything other than what they've been taught from when they were children. But when you start to read the translations of these different types of books, you start going, wow. And then you start to see like all these weird connections between two religions that you thought couldn't be more different, like Hinduism and Christianity, where you have like Krishna, which is like Christ, but he supposedly is like this Christ-like figure in Hinduism, and he's going to return, and he's going to do the same thing that Jesus is going to do. It's just instead of calling him Christ, they call him Krishna. And then it's weird, and then people will argue, well, they have a polytheistic religion. Not necessarily. They really have a monotheistic religion, but all of the various gods like Ganesh and all these different gods they actually are just different aspects of the one God. It's all Brahman. It's just different aspects of him. because he is, I guess, in their belief, omnipotent, and he's everything and all things, whatever. Well, that's the same way we believe is God. We just don't attribute all these different characteristics to him. The funny thing is, though, I mean, when you look at the Old Testament and you see, like, when Genesis 6, when it talks about the giants in those days, and they became, their offspring became mighty men of renown, all this. It talks about the Nephilim. You go to the book of Enoch, it is literally like the long version of Genesis 6, which is even Jesus references Enoch. Everybody references Enoch, but Enoch's not in the Bible. And then you're going like, well, why is that book taken out of the Bible? It was taken out of the Bible for the same reason that there were so many other books taken out of the Bible, because it did not promote the Code of Deuteronomy. The Code of Deuteronomy being the original Torah. That was a good way for people to be controlled by, the kings and queens and the nobility. And they said, well, if you're preaching about reincarnation, it's like what happens is people aren't as apt to do right. They're not going to listen to you. But when you tell people, hey, you die, you go either to heaven or hell, they're going to act right. They're going to act accordingly because they don't want to go to hell, or they want a reward to go to heaven. If you tell people, hey, you act bad, you may have to come back and do it again, they'll be like, oh, well, I'm good with that. Because that sounds like a better alternative than going to a hell realm. But, when Jesus says you must be born again, I'm of the belief that it is physical and spiritual, because it says in the Bible, that as is above as is below. It's the same. It's the spirit is the same as the flesh. When you have the melding of the two, with these, like, what I believe are these Nephilim creatures, they're going to be able to do things that is going to seem like magic to us, but it's really just a science that they understand that we don't, because they come from a different density. Just as Jesus did. Jesus came here, performed miracles, and everybody was like, wow, this is amazing. But that's because he was from a far more advanced place in the heavens. And so when he came here as the Word made flesh, he was like performing miracles. It was nothing to him. It was like, this is just, he could transcend, walk on water, things that a spirit can do. Like when you read about spirits, like I was reading a story the other day about ghost ships, and there was this spirit that was floating on the water, like outside of a ship. And I thought to myself, Jesus did that. So that's why the disciples were like, oh my gosh. They thought at first they were sore afraid because he thought he was a ghost. They thought he was a spirit, but it was Jesus just walking on the water. And, I believe it was Peter, wasn't it, that tried to walk on the water, and he started to do it, but then he lost his nerve and he fell into the water.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and Jesus says, you can do these things, but you have to have faith. You have to have, we tell ourselves, hey, this is the world we live in. This is the way it is. And so you're kind of bound by the strictures of this matrix, of this physical reality. But in true reality, when you start to learn the true nature of our reality, you start to realize that we all are of the life and breath and spark of God. We aren't Christ, we aren't the Word made flesh, but we are given special abilities. But I think that people keep them bottled up and locked up, and I think modern society lends to that. The more that we keep our heads down and we don't pay attention to what's going on around us, the less perceptive we are, the more susceptible we are to all these tricks. And I think what these things do, like traveling on orbs, transforming from these orbs into these creatures, and it's like it's insidious and scary, and it's whatever. But if people really paid attention, like when you go to sleep, there are times when you're really out of your body, and when you have these dreams where you're actually falling back into your body, and you can see these creatures, not just these Bigfoot, but like all these different types of creatures. They're all over the place, and they're in that fourth density because they're in that realm that's in between the physical and heavenly realms, And so that's what these demons do. They're able to manipulate. They're able to mess with your mind. Barton, we've talked about this before, but how they use a type of mind control.
Right.
Yeah.
Which most people mistake for infrasound because they just want to ascribe a natural ability of a natural animal to an unnatural, supernatural animal. Rather it's not animals, but a supernatural entity. So they don't really need infrasound like elephants or lions or tigers. I think it's something quite beyond that. Myself, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. I've been wrong hundreds of times in my life, and I'm sure I'll be wrong hundreds more before I'm dead. So, but I don't believe this is infrasound at play.
Yeah,
not as we know it.
Not as we know it. I mean, I don't doubt that there could be, but like, lions and tigers like infrasound. Like there's the roar that people have talked about dogmen doing it, but when these dogmen or these Bigfoot do it, it's like they hurt you with it, and I think it's something that they can manipulate, and if they can manipulate you, and in particular the mindscape, and I talk about that all the time. I mean, of course, everybody knows the saying, "Idle mind is the devil's workshop," and when you're not occupied, your mind wanders to deviance, But I think that these things, they understand the mind-body spiritual connection because they know they are spiritual beings having a physical experience, whereas humans, we are born into this physical reality, and so many people are so intelligent with their mind, but they have no perception because they don't perceive beyond the mind. They don't perceive the spirit. They don't realize that we are actually just spirits having a physical experience, not the other way around. Like when your body dies, your spirit's still there. And so many people, even I've seen devout Christians like who go to church on Sunday and they'll read the Gospels and they'll hear about the Holy Ghost. They'll hear about the Holy Spirit. They'll read about Jesus performing miracles, and they won't believe a lick of anything spiritual. Like if you told them, somebody in their house is having problems with some sort of spirit or a shadow or anything like that, they just absolutely will dismiss it, and they will make every excuse in the book. But they'll go to church every Sunday and read about spiritual this and spiritual that. But in their everyday life, it doesn't exist. Like it absolutely doesn't exist. And if they saw a Bigfoot, even if it materialized in front of them and then dematerialized, they would say, "Oh, it was a physical being, and it was a trick of the light." They, what if it was cloaking? No, it wasn't cloaking. It's something to do with her fur and the weird light creating an effect, and then it disappeared. It's some sort of physical creature. And these are people who are devout Christians, and they'll still believe that. They will absolutely believe. I've seen it happen. I mean, just literally, like a friend of mine, his house was haunted when we were kids. I didn't really have a lot of experiences in that house. Like, we had a couple weird things happen, nothing like anything dramatically like major that I could point to, but he was having weird experiences. He was seeing like a little kid, who was a little bit younger than our age, I think, and he'd be running around in his pajamas and and of course, like some of my friends said, you go over there, we played Atari. We were little, and they would say, "Oh, this little kid," and they even gave him like a little name or something. And I like Jamie or James or something. I don't know the kid's name, whatever. Or maybe it was something else. I don't remember, but I never saw it. But we did have like weird stuff happen, like the door would open, stuff like that. And then his parents were real devout Christian. And they went to the same church we did. And that church would talk about the spirit. Like they would talk about it, and they would ignore that ghost did not exist to them. Like their sons and their daughter were seeing it. But they didn't. They ignored it like it wasn't real, like it did not happen. And his dad even had a Bigfoot encounter at one time, completely rationalized it too. I mean, like it was like he saw this thing come up out of the grass and then go back down, and then when he was in that area, like it was gone, like it disappeared, like something had to have happened. Like how did it, But he was convinced that it was some sort of physical creature. Like, he was convinced. Now, he believed in Bigfoot after that. But this was a church-going person. Like, he'd go every Sunday, and he'd rationalized it, and that's what a lot of people do. And then they want answers, but they want their answers. They want the answers to fit into the box that they want to be able to put it in. And that's the problem right there, because a lot of times those answers don't fit into the box of their thinking or the box of their choosing, you know. And you have these people who are there's atheists too and evolutionists and whatever, and they want to believe that this thing is some sort of evolutionary creature, where, you know, here in North America, there are no records of any sort of ape. There's no fossil records of them having been here. So Dinopithecus, you know, Gigantopithecus, where is the proof? Like, where are the fossils? I was arguing with somebody the other day in one of the groups. I was like, where's your proof? Like, you believe that this is an ape that's running around doing all this stuff. And then they cherry pick. They choose to believe certain stories, but if you, Darrell, told them your story, they're gonna cherry pick it and say, okay, well, we'll hear this story here, but let's leave out all the other stuff. Let's leave out any of the weird stuff about the orbs. You know, let's just talk about the physical part of it. And they will literally create an entire narrative. Well, they already have, but they'll take your story and just add to the narrative that it's a flesh and blood creature, only taking the part of your story that is of the physical part of it. And I think that's a great disservice to the community. And I think that people who are supposed, quote unquote, researchers who are literally leading people around by the nose, very famous people too, you know, on TV and writing books, and they're going to all these conferences and they're talking about all this stuff, and they're closed-minded completely to anything that can disrupt that little paradigm that they have constructed. And it is a very man-made paradigm that's been constructed by people who are afraid. I think they're afraid of the truth.
It's an illusion.
Yeah.
You're exactly right, Josh. It's an illusion that they're spoon-feeding everyone. And what we're trying to do is break that spell that everyone's under and expose the truth about these things.
Tell the whole story.
So they're all related. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can't look at just a Bigfoot phenomenon and ignore the UAP phenomenon that comes hand in hand with it, or whatever, the poltergeist, the ghost, you know, spiritual phenomenon that you're having in your house after you see one of these things. So, like you said, they're doing a great disservice to everyone. And I think it's very intentional, but I think it's our job and our duty to our fellow man is to stand up and tell the truth about these things and what we've seen and what we know. Because most of the people that are spreading the narrative about these so-called cryptid creatures, they don't know. It's just their opinion. Most of them have never had an encounter of their own, right? So they wouldn't know anything other than what they've been taught or what they've heard on TV or read in a book. So it's people like us that have lived through these experiences firsthand. I think it's up to us to try and get the truth out finally after 70 years of these flesh and blood apers running around in circles chasing their own tails, and they haven't given us a single good answer to anything. Not one. So we need to change that. We need to make people aware that these creatures aren't what, you know, everybody is telling us that they are.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think
go ahead, Darrell.
A big problem with that has been for so long. And that's a good thing that these groups like mine and others on Facebook, Michael Patterson's that I helped him start, have done for people, because I was in a position after my first sighting that I couldn't tell anybody, because everybody I even mentioned to, they thought I was either crazy or I was just making up something. And, you know, you tell somebody that type of story and they look at you like, what are you talking about? I mean, even credible people that I knew, they believed me because they knew I was honest, but they didn't. Your mind don't wrap around that type of thing to believe something like that's possible. And mine was the same way the day that I seen it. But the impact is so great And if anybody had an impact, it's you, Barton, because, that story you told at the conference, I'm sure you've told many a times, but I felt every bit of the fear of every part of that story that you told, because I know that fear. And after you get that fear, you don't ever forget it, because it don't leave. And, when it comes back again, I thought mine was pretty much gone, or at least better. But after what happened to me at my home, I'm back to where I was in 92, 93. I mean, I'm not having the nightmares, but my fear's back again, because these things are capable of doing unheard of things, like follow you home or turn into something that we don't know what they are, and the orbs turning into something. I've heard people say they've seen Bigfoot come from the orbs. I've never seen Bigfoot cloak. I mean, I did see one go behind a tree and just don't know where it went. I couldn't find it. But at the same time, people don't believe in all that. And the biggest majority of people this day and time still don't believe anything we say. They're normal people that don't even study Bigfoot or know anything about these encounters. You tell them, those same people are still there. They don't believe in that. They think you've seen a bear, or you've seen something. It's always a bear.
Yeah, or there's a million bears running around.
Yeah, and it's always.
They all think that we're crazy or fantastic liars, but we can't really concern ourselves with these people.
They really do.
We have to tell the truth no matter what.
Well, Darrell, they would take your story and pick it apart and just leave out like a lot of pertinent information and just turn it into, and what they literally do is they just turn it into something completely different than what it really is. And that's with Dogman too. Like there'll be like somebody plays with a Ouija board and there'll be a Dogman that comes out of their closet. And I've had a couple like stories that were very similar to that. And a guy I used to work with, he had told me that a lot of people had played with Ouija boards and they would tell them that they started having these Dogman encounters. And I'm like, well, why don't you tell people that? And he's like, it's not my job to say that. It's like, dude, because the narrative, it's a much more attractive narrative just to say, oh, it's a physical creature running around out there and we can discover it one day, when that's complete nonsense. I don't think it'll ever be. That's never going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. Because the nature of what these things are is completely being lost on people. They're just completely not, and they're not looking at the entire picture. And when I started Paranormal Roundtable, my whole goal was to look at the entire thing like one big mosaic, not just one piece of the puzzle and pick it up and examine the heck out of that piece of the puzzle and then pretend like that was the whole thing and just ignore the other 1,000 pieces, because, everybody picks up a piece of a puzzle and then they're real guarded with like, this is mine, like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, it's my precious, but it's like, dude, if we all took those precious pieces and put it together, we could make the picture a lot more clearer, but people don't want that. And then people want to be real guarded with what they get, like a story they get from somebody, and they get mad if somebody else gets that story. And it's like, the more people that you go and you share your story with, Darrell, the better. Like, I know you were on Bettina's show. That's a good thing. You go to another show and just spread the truth, spread the word about what you've seen and what you've witnessed. And the more this story gets out, the better it is for the community. See, I'm not greedy with that. I don't want to just, you got to come to me for the information, for the good stuff, And people have said like, oh, well, you told the same stories that have been on Darkness, and on Supernaturals. Somebody can come to me and they can tell the same story that they've told on 50 other podcasts. It doesn't matter. I'm going to give you my perspective on it. I'm going to break it down to what I think it is. Some other host or author may break it down in another way and think this, whatever. But as long as that host or that author is actually doing the service to the people and telling the whole story, that's what's important to me. If they're not, then I'm gonna call them out on their BS, because you're editing, and you're clipping it down to something that you want it to be. Not to what, Darrell's story is, and that to me is the most important thing. That's the main part of this,
Be honest with you, I wish I could get rid of the fear that I have, because now it wouldn't surprise me if one of these things didn't bang on my house here, it wouldn't shock me. So that part probably is the most fear is, are they going to come back and visit again? So,
Jesus would keep them from doing that, Darrell. Trust me.
Well,
I know. I haven't had a trip encounter in 20 years. But I couldn't go out of the house without having something like that happen. So,
yeah, I can't imagine what you lived with as a small child, going through what you and your family went through. I mean, I just can't imagine that, because it was rough enough for me in my 20s when that happened to me. And much less being a little kid. I'm sure your whole family was terrified, like you said.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were terrified, and, a lot of people don't know this, but once we moved out of that house in Spotsville, Mountain Ridge Road, my mother and father's marriage didn't last but about 3 months, and they were divorced. So it broke up my entire family, and it affected us forever. We never recovered from that. But I think, Darrell, when we tell everything that we know and we've seen, then that allows the people who have no experience in any of this, that are just onlookers, it at least gives them a chance to choose the right conclusion. At least they have a chance. The truth has been said before them. All they have to do is choose it. Whether they will or not is not up to us. But when we stand up and tell what we know and what we saw for the right reasons, then that's all that we can do. That's the best that we can do. But we need to do that. And Josh and I are trying to get this movement going where the old guard with the flesh and blood apers are going to be replaced by the truthers. That's us. We're going to tell the truth and let people decide for themselves. But at least they have the opportunity to decide, right? Because there's two stories out there. There's two sides to the Bigfoot story. There's two sides to the Dogman story, UFO, ghosts, all that. So as long as we do our part, then I think that we're doing good, and that's all we can do.
Yeah, I can agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and I have friends that are apers. I'm not trying to get rid of them. I just want them to be more accepting of the other side and not just ignore evidence.
Right, because the other side, that's where the truth is. I have lots of friends that are apers and think that I'm a great liar or mistaken or,
No, they don't think you're
something.
A liar. They just think that.
Well, yeah.
I think what they think is that you're mistaken, or your thinking is skewed or whatever. But the truth is the truth. You're an experiencer. I'm an experiencer. I lived in a haunted house. And it sounds so cliche and silly, that we've had friends that have told me and Barton, oh, I think it'd be cool to live in a haunted. No, it's not cool. I mean, maybe if it's some little small thing that's going on and you can ignore it, like. One of my ex-girlfriend's friends, she lived in a so-called haunted house, and I went over there, and I was like, she's like, and then the brush, when I put it down, it kind of moved, and I was like, okay. I was like, honey, that's not a haunted house, all right? Try getting slapped on your back, okay? Try having a light fixture come at a weird angle and fly down and hit you. Try seeing your dog pulling on a blanket that looks like it's levitating, and it happened in front of like 3 or 4 people. And like a bunch of weird stuff happened. I come in and my fish tank, like the fish had boiled and been killed in the fish tank. That's a haunting. Okay, that's what was going on with her. And it's like, oh, I felt like something touched my head, and something sat on the bed or something, and there was like a brush that moved. I'm like, yeah, that's cute. That's not what I'm talking about. That maybe that's maybe you're dealing with some sort of like friendly ghost or something. I don't know what that is, but what I went through was not that, and it was for a long time too.
Me neither.
Yeah,
there was no peace to be had.
Yeah, there's no peace, and
they're haunted.
Yeah, I think seeing that thing when I was 15 had a lot to do with it, because my abuelita said when I was born I had ojo totaro, which is like the gift of the eye. You're born with this gift, and that you will see, you know, and I've often thought that, you know, and that's part of me being, you know, half Hispanic, half white too, is like you walk in two different cultures and it prepares you for the rigors of walking in two worlds, being able to see into the spirit world, you know, which is just being able to see into another density. That's all it is to me. But guys, it's been great. I've enjoyed the conversation, and like I said, we're at the 3-hour mark now. And everybody that's listening, like and subscribe. Join our groups. Darrell, you want to give them the coordinates where you can be reached in your group?
Yeah, it's called Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures. We're on Facebook. All you got to do is send an invite, or you can go on and get in, or we can befriend you and invite you in either one. So appreciate anybody coming on. We have some really great researchers that spending time out in the woods, and we have some superstar people in there like Barton and Josh do. So it's pretty much a good group, and nobody criticizes. So that's the best thing about our group.
Right, great group. I really
entitled to their opinion.
Enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being in that group, and I thank you for inviting me in there, Darrell.
And Darrell, if you can make it down to Texas, come to the Jefferson Bigfoot Conference, October 14th.
I would love to get down there. It's been a while since I've been to Texas. I know some of that area, but I would love to get down there. I'm staying up here now on the coast, on the ocean with my kids, and that's what I'm up here right now for. Been up here for quite a while with my kids. So I've got family back home, so I come home about once a month. So, but anyway, I appreciate y'all having me on, and I've enjoyed talking with you, and have the greatest respect for both of you, and appreciate you being such a good friend.
Yeah, same to you.
Yeah, same to you, Darrell.
Yep.
Yeah, I really got to know Barton more, and because I haven't been able to talk that much to you guys because I'm not around you enough, but I do enjoy talking with you when I
did too, and I could talk to you all night, Darrell, just like Josh. You know, me and Josh talk sometimes for 8 or 9 hours at a time.
And then our wives get involved too, and everybody's just having one big talk, and it's crazy, man. And like me and Barton have had, like, you know, Lyle on the phone, Ken and Nick, and we'll just talk forever. It's just like we just talk and just talk about all kinds of stuff, man. It's crazy, you know. And we get in there and we have chat groups and stuff, and we bounce ideas back and forth. You know, Ken and Lyle are sort of in that aper category, you know, but they're very benign about it. They don't push their views on anybody, and they're very respectful of other people's views. So that's not who we're talking about. But there are some in the community on both sides who are very aggressive with their views. And I tell people, even people who are in my camp, which I'm like all of the above. It could be everything or anything. But I tell people, you know, I'm like, be very respectful of others, and don't attack people, and don't, you know, but it just seems like there is this movement that's just trying to hang on, this stranglehold, that these things are completely flesh and blood, and they don't do anything out of the ordinary, which by their very existence is out of the ordinary. It's paranormal. I mean, it just is. But anyway, guys, it was good talking to you. From everybody at Paranormal Roundtable, Barton Nunley, and our good friend Darrell. Everybody, good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.